Assalamualaikum and very good morning. Today we are going to have tutorial for component and deployment. So before we start, please make sure you have submitted the attendance. Okay, so this is the question. So we have few questions, but then the first few is basically the theory part. What are the main purposes of using component diagrams? So I just give you the answer lah. Easier, isn't it? Right. What are the main purposes of using component diagrams? Model physical software components and the relationship between them. So the focus is on this. Okay. And then we have we can model source code and relationship between the source code files. Okay. And then model the structure of releases of software. So how are you going to release that? For example, .me.ini.exe, you know, because you do not develop .exe file, right? But then when it comes to releasing a software, usually we have this exe, but it depends. Okay, that is the example. And then specify the files that are compiled into an executable. Okay. So this is the main purposes of using component diagrams. Basically, you can have some part of this to be included in the deployment diagram. Okay, I try to relate with the project. Second, what are the main purposes of using deployment diagram? So this one is definitely is a physical hardware element and the communication path between them, the architecture of the system. So basically, to make your life easier, maybe before you draw your deployment diagram, you should know a little bit about architecture, software architecture, whether you want to use 2-tier architecture, 3-tier architecture, cloud architecture, so that you can apply to for your project. And then document the deployment of software component and hardware nodes. Okay, alright. The third one, what is the difference between components in the component diagram and components in the deployment diagram? Okay, so components shown in the deployment diagram model the deployment of runtime components on processes in the plant system. There are normally instances of components, and components in component diagram are usually source files or other elements of the software under development. Okay, so easier to say, usually for deployment diagram is we are looking at the physical architecture of the software development, the whole software when you are going to release that. Okay, the back end, the end, and the front end. But the components is mostly we want to see the main source file, okay, program codes or that will generate, that will execute the whole system. Okay. Alright. What are the main steps in producing a component diagram? First, you must know the purpose of the diagram. What do you want to focus on? And add components to the diagram, grouping them within other components if appropriate. and add other elements to the diagram. For example, usually we will show the interfaces or objects. Usually interfaces are because that is the easier one to understand the diagram. But sometimes you also can include the objects using the stereotypes for the important part. Okay, and add the dependencies between the elements of the diagram, the relationship between them. However, for the deployment, so decide the purpose of the diagram. Basically, deployment is the whole structure. Okay. Uh, why we have to decide the purpose of the diagram? Because sometimes, if you are talking about a very huge system where it got so many subsystems, okay, so maybe your deployment diagram is mainly for certain subsystem, not the whole thing. Okay. So that's why you have to decide. But in your case, most of the projects you can have one deployment diagram to represent the whole development. Okay. Second, add notes to the diagram. Add communication associations to the diagram, the relationship. Add other elements to the diagram, active object or active components, right? And add dependency between the components and objects. Okay, if any lah, right? So this is the basic or theory part of the component and deployment diagram. So next is this one. Okay. Draw a component diagram to show that a Java class file is depending on the java.ase runtime program and the Java classes in the zip file. You may name the file according to your preferences. Okay. So anyone dah buat benda ni? Anyone wants to show your answer? Seorang tak buat. I just give you the answer kan. In other words. What's this? I don't have, what is my answer? That's weird. Okay. The network slow, man. Here is the tutorial 12. Is it? 11. Oh, network slow. Okay. Sorry. So you can have something like this. So this one is just to show the relationship. For example, because you want to show that a Java class file on the depending on the Java EXE. So this one you use dependency lah. Okay. So you just create any class. Okay. That's why I say here your preferences, and then depend on the Java EXE. It will depend on the Java EXE to execute. Okay. And then and the Java class in zip file. So this one is on the zip file. That's all. This question mainly to show you how to use the dependency, this line. Okay. That's all. So the notation is something like this, and then you have to name the box with this one, with the file's name inside the box. Okay. That one doesn't matter actually. The next one is draw a deployment diagram to show how a web browser, let's say Google Chrome, do you know there is a Netscape? And the web server, for example Apache, they are located on different machines, and the communication protocol that use HTTP, for example HTTP. Okay, so this one somehow we call it as a two-tier architecture. All right, so you can have something like this client server. All right, the client is where the Netscape comes in, web browser lah. This one web browser, and then we communicate with the Apache, which is a web server. All right. They are located on the server. So using HTTP protocol, because sometimes you cannot you can have other than HTTP, right? So that's why this one is mentioned that you just put HTTP lah. If not, then you can use whatever that you are going to use for the protocol that you're going to use. Okay. Other than HTTP is like HTTPS, right? Okay, we have three entity classes are used in the collaboration: car sharer, journey, and address. Each of these classes will be implemented by a .java source file. These classes are used across a number of use cases and are grouped together into a car sharing component as Java or archive. Okay, there are two other classes, MCS user interface and MCS control. Each of these will be implemented by a Java file. The MCS control component has a dependency on the car sharing component and on the MCS user interface component. Okay. So how are you going to answer this? This is, what is the question? Okay. Draw a component diagram showing the source code dependency. Okay. So macam mana nak kisah? Draw a component diagram. So first it says about car sharer, Java, and address. So this one is classes, right? And but then it says that these classes will be implemented by a .java. So it's already tell you that what's the name file for car sharer, journey, and address. So what you have to do is, let me share you a screen. Okay, so based on that question, the first sentence is about three entity classes. So you have car sharer. So you just draw a component for car sharer lah. Okay, so let's say you have car sharer, and then it says about the Java file. So you have to use the name. Okay, so you got something like this, car sharer.java. Okay, so same thing goes to journey.java and address.java. Okay, so we got this journey.java and address.java. And then it says that these classes are used across a number of use cases and are grouped together into a car sharing component as Java archive. So you combine it together lah as a jar file. So name it as a car sharing dot jar. Okay, something like this, right? And then there are two other classes, MCS user interface and MCS control. Okay, so each of these will be implemented by Java. So it's also .java, and MCS control component has a dependency on the car sharing, has dependency on car sharing, and on the MCS user interface. Okay, so first I have to draw the control, MCS control. Control.java. Okay, and then MCS control also depending on MCS user interface. So MCS user interface dot Java. So as simple as that. Oh, I can update. Okay. Alright. Any question? Okay, kan? So basically it's just like this. Component diagram. So the second one, B, the MCS control okay, something like this. So next is the MCS control .java and MCS user interface .java file are grouped together into jar file, and MCS control Java component will need to read a configuration file MCS INI and require head file MCS HLP. Okay, so redraw the component diagram to show the runtime component dependency. So you have to refine the one that you already have. Okay, adding more things. So now it says that first you have to group MCS control and MCS user interface into one jar file. Okay, and then you will name it as a, oh, it doesn't say. So then you can make it MCS.jar. Both are MCS, right? So what you can do is okay. So what you can do, you have to group these two. So how to do that? Have to remove this. Wait, and then make it as like this. Okay. Okay. So you group it together. Once you group, then you have to name it. So I just put MCS jar. And then the MCS component, we need to make a configuration. So MCS control Java. Okay. So that one need MCS INI. So how to do this? Let's go with there. Okay. So first is a MCS INI. But then here it says that the MCS INI is not a component, it's just a configuration file. Okay, so you just draw anything that looks like a file. Another one for the help. Okay, so that's all for B. Right? Car sharing.jar. So the last one is a deployment. Right? Based on this, you have to make it as a deployment. The nodes are 3 client PCs and then a server and a printer. Okay, and the communication protocol between the client and server is TCP/IP, and between the server and the printer is a standard parallel printer protocol. The MCS jar will be deployed. Okay, we have MCS jar will be deployed into the 3 client PCs. Meanwhile, the car sharing jar, okay, MCS help MCS INI will be deployed into the server. Okay. So how to do that? So first of all what you have now is components. Deployment, you have to use the box, right? The nodes is in the form of box. So you have to add that where we already told you what inside the nodes based on these components. Okay. Okay, first I go line by line first. The nodes are 3 client PC, 3 client PCs, a server and a printer. So it has PC client, a server and printer. Okay. The communication protocol between the client and the server is TCP/IP. Okay, and between the server and the printer, okay, now the easy one is a printer. So I can have printer. That was well. Okay, now what I can do is I make a one box, one notes lah basically. For printer. Okay. Right. So this printer, what does it say just now? And with standard parallel protocol. Okay, between the server. So you have relationship with the server. So what's exactly inside the server? The car sharing jar, the MCS help, MSS INI will be deployed in the server. Okay. So I have to move this forward. Okay. I got this here. I got this here. And then oh, still not enough space. So there is a relationship between printer to the this server. This server, because the last sentence, the car sharing jar, MCS help, MCS INI deploy in the server. So this one is I just put server lah here. Server. Okay. So the relationship is like this, and it is parallel. Okay. So go back to the previous sentence. The communication protocol between the client and the server is TCP/IP. So what's inside the client? Between the server and MCS jar. We deploy three. Okay, MCS jar will be deployed into the three client PC. MCS jar. So we have MCS jar will be deployed in three client PC. So you're going to have three of these. So what I can do is first make this smaller. Okay. So and then put it inside. Okay. So you're going to have this MCS jar. Okay. So then I delete this. And then the name of this node, what is this node for? It is for client. Okay. Since the question says you got three of this, so you have to copy paste lah. and then it has a relationship with the server through TCP/IP. Then we have this, this, and this through TCP/IP. Okay, so if you look at this, but then you have to remember there is a dependency between MCS jar to car sharing jar, right? So the one that I just remove, so I make it better, draw it properly. We must know the dependency as well. Something like that. Okay. So this is for C as a deployment. So I can say this is a two-tier architecture. It's the between client and server. And printer is normal lah. So if your project you have mentioned about report, right? That can print report, that can print receipt. So it means that you will have a printer, right? So your your deployment diagram must include that. Okay. Any question? But then for your project, most of you will not use 2T architecture because this one is very old architecture, the one that you set up in your in your in your room. You know, if you want to play games between your friend, not using the internet, using the one you create client server. For your project, most of you are using 3D architecture. I know, I'm not sure whether you have learned that or not, but then you can learn it through the Google. It's very simple architecture. Then you know where you have to put your server, and then some of you have different kind of server, okay? And then what are inside your web browser, you know? And then some of you, your project has mobile and also the web-based system. So how are you going to put that? All right, it's quite straightforward lah. That's why I advise some of the group that already have deployment, the one that already showed me yesterday, I advise to include component inside the deployment. So it's more refined, it's more detailed. Okay, if you just put notes, that one is exactly like the 3-tier or 2-tier architecture. It's nothing, but we want to see also what exactly you have in your server. Some of you already put lah, you know, a module of the system, the proposed system. Good. Any question? No question. So if you have no question, so that's all for today. You can ask, since we still have time, you can ask me about your project or maybe for tonight. Tonight is nothing lah, just you have activity diagram and state diagram, case study, 2 questions just like before, and then same duration of time, but then there are some requests to extend, instead of 45 minutes. I will inform you in the telegram whether I will extend it or not. Any question? No question? If no question, that's all. Thank you. See you on next week for your presentation for your project. Bye.